Good morning. My name's Bridget and I'm the vicar of two local churches. I've met some of you before and I'm sure I'll get to know those of you in Year 7 over the next few months. To start with this morning, I'd like to show you a photograph. I wonder what you think of when you see this picture. If you like, you can press pause and you can take a moment to share your answers. So what did you think when you saw that picture of Harry Kane? Maybe Harry Kane is one of your heroes. Maybe you can't stand him because you hate the team that he plays for. Perhaps you didn't have a clue who it was and frankly you don't care. Or maybe you think that footballers are a bunch of overpaid prima donnas. Well, that is one of the stereotypes that exists about footballers. People think that they're only interested in football, money and fast cars. But over the last few months, I've seen a couple of stories in the news that have challenged that stereotype, and I wanted to share them with you this morning. First of all was a news story about this man. That's Marcus Rashford. Marcus Rashford plays for Man United, as I'm sure you know. And back in June, he made the headlines. This time it wasn't for scoring goals, but it was for taking on the government and winning. He took on the government on the issue of child poverty. Marcus grew up in a household where his mum worked full-time, but unfortunately she didn't earn enough money to cover all of the family's bills. That meant that there were times where they didn't have enough to eat. So Marcus knows firsthand what it's like to be hungry and to be worried about where your next meal is coming from. Normally, the government pay to provide families who are struggling financially with free school meals. But just before the summer holidays, they announced that they wouldn't provide food for families during the summer. Marcus knew that that would be a disaster for loads of families all around this country and here in Lewisham. And so he publicly took on the government and he challenged them. And because of what he said and did and the pressure that built up behind him, the government did a U-turn. They changed their minds and they agreed that they would provide money for families in need during the summer holidays. And not just that, during lockdown, Marcus Rashford raised £20 million for vulnerable families in order to provide them with 3 million meals. In a moment, I'm going to ask you to press pause and to discuss a couple of questions. First of all, what do you think of what Marcus Rashford did? Are you impressed? Or maybe you've got some critical thoughts. And my second question is, how do you feel about the fact that child poverty exists in the UK today and why? Take a moment and share your answers. The other footballer who caught my attention was former footballer Gary Lineker. These days, we tend to see him presenting Match of the Day. Now, Gary Lineker has been rather critical of the government, a bit like Marcus Rashford, but this time over the issue of refugees. He feels that our country ought to be doing more to help people who are seeking asylum. Recently, he was expressing his views on Twitter, and another Twitter user said to him, "So Gary, have you housed any yet?" At that point, Gary Lineker shared a screenshot from his phone, and it showed that he had contacted a refugee charity and that he had offered to house a refugee in his own home. Now, of course, Gary Lineker has a big home. He lives in a £4 million mansion in Surrey, but even so, I think it's still a significant thing to invite a stranger into your home and to allow them to live with you. Quite a lot of people have criticised Gary Lineker for what he's doing. They've called him a lefty lovey, and some people have said that he's virtue signalling. I wonder what you think. I think he's someone who stands up for what he believes in. He has actually acted on his beliefs. They're more than words. In a moment, I'd like you to pause the video again and to think about whether there are any people you look up to because they do the right thing, or because you're impressed with the way in which they live, their values and their actions. Share your responses now. At the moment in our worships, we're thinking about being principled. being people who believe in something and then live out those beliefs, who put them into practice. Now, neither Marcus Rashford nor Gary Lineker are perfect, but let's face it, none of us are. But I think they are people of principle. They know what they believe in, they know what they're concerned about, and they are trying to do something about it. Gary Lineker said that when he was a young man that he didn't really know much about current affairs. He wasn't really aware of what was happening in the world, but as he's got older, he has learnt more and he cares more. So yes, you could criticise young footballers for being only interested in football and money and fast cars. But actually Marcus Rashford is only 22 and he's already giving a huge amount of his time and his energy to campaign on the issue of child poverty. It's like our Bible verse said that I showed you right at the start of this worship. Be an example of good behaviour. I think Gary Lineker and Marcus Rashford just give us a little idea of what that could look like. But I wonder what it looks like for you. What are the issues that you care about, that you feel strongly about? What do you want to take a stand on? What do you want to take action on? Maybe you don't quite know what to do at the moment, but where might you start? So take a moment, press pause once again, and this time share with one another some of the issues that you feel strongly about, the things that you'd like to take action on. There are lots of things that I feel strongly about, but I don't always know where to start and how to respond. Sometimes it's not clear what action we should take. I've talked this morning about child poverty, about families not having enough food to eat, and I've also talked a bit about refugees. Those are the two concerns that Marcus Rashford and Gary Lineker have. Well, in our parish, we also are concerned about those things, and so we work in partnership with a local charity called Action for Refugees in Lewisham, and we run a food bank for them. That means that every week we provide food for 30 families who live in Lewisham and Greenwich. We collect donations from people in the local area and then we deliver them to the homes of those families. So perhaps if you're looking for a way to respond, if you want to put those beliefs that you have into practice, maybe you could support our food bank. We would love it if you would bring donations of tinned tomatoes into school. Over the next few weeks, we'll be thinking about harvest and giving thanks for the food that we have. Well, one way of giving thanks is by sharing what we have. So we'd love it if you could bring in as many tins of tomatoes as you can carry. It's fine if it's just one, but if you can manage more, we'd be really grateful. And then we can share them with the families that we support. Thanks for listening this morning, and thanks for getting involved as well.